What's very interesting about the Jobs Ohio model, which is a little complex, and I'm hoping that I'm not going to butcher this, but they actually, this is about 10 years ago, leased the state liquor sales tax. So that was a $1.5 billion that is a part of that lease that they had for 25 years. And so an example is the $100 million that they're investing in the Cincinnati Innovation District. They're doing something similar in Cleveland. So $300 million being invested by Jobs Ohio is the largest investment in healthcare and tech that the state's ever made. So there's a tremendous amount of flexibility that other states don't have. A perfect example is during the pandemic. Instead of winding down or having to worry about funding, Jobs Ohio actually rolled out about 10 different programs. One of them was a growth fund or a growth equity fund to invest in younger, startup, earlier stage companies. There was also an inclusion grant money that was being invested into industrial sites. Just a tremendous amount of work that they're able to do because of that flexibility in their funding. All right. Well, thanks everybody. Enjoy your time in Cincinnati. Have a beautiful day, and hopefully the Reds bring home a win.
Henry, if people if they want you or they want your money, what do they do?
Just email me. We'll have a conversation.
And Mark will make sure that your email is in all of the materials, et cetera, et cetera.
And readycincinnati.com, all of our contact information is on there as well. I don't technically run the organization. I should put that out there.
That's what a girl would do. I asserted that you run it.
Listen, I don't need it coming back to my CEO that I'm standing up saying I run.
Well, but she's a her too.
Yeah, she sure is.
All right.
Yep. Thanks again, Jack.
So, Cintrifuse is an umbrella entity under which Union Hall exists. And we're in what's physically called Union Hall, multiple floors with breakout rooms, and there's some enterprises that set up shop here in an incubation or acceleration context. And this is the epicenter of Union Hall. Cintrifuse is arguably unique in this country, maybe the Western world, in the way in which it has become, by intention, the center of the spoke wheel and has reached out to either all or most of the entities that make up an entrepreneurial ecosystem. And it focuses on the region, it enables or facilitates companies to start and or grow. And we'll hear more about it from its leader, Pete Blackshaw. Pete, you should know in advance of him walking up here, because I don't want you to not know this. He might be one of the most remarkable persons that you've ever met in your lives. Well, what do I mean in your lives? How else would it be so much? Pete grew up in the Los Angeles area, was entrepreneurial from the start, went to business school at Harvard, Procter & Gamble after, was a sort of a radical there in the brand management system, of course. And he was a leader within P&G 20 plus years ago in exploring and advancing digital. He was Mr. Electronic while the company was still pumping out paper. And he moved that large ocean liner into the digital zone where it's now prominently placed as part of his effort, as part of its marketing plan to build various brands. He left P&G. I had the honor and pleasure of helping him depart, backing him in a startup of a consumer-facing company. He ran it, built it, we sold it to Nielsen 5 or 10 years later, and subsequent to that, Pete was stolen by Nestle, moved to the Nestle home base in Switzerland, where he, Erica, and their children lived for 8 years. He was in charge of global digital for Nestle. Nestle, as you might know, is a large public company that sells lots of stuff. So here he was in charge of digital for the entire world. They wanted him to stay till forever, and some ties here in Cincinnati, including over the Rhine, as he was a leader in the early days of stimulating interest in over the Rhine, that he finally was attracted to come back. That occurred 3 years ago. They're living happily ever after or better. And as the person in charge of this operation, I said remarkable earlier, I guess I would assert that despite being relatively young, I've never met anybody with the leadership skills that he happens to possess, and therefore hopefully he'll manifest some of those when he comes up right now to speak. Pete, this is about you.
Wow.
Oh, really?
And Pete, by the way, because of your genetic makeup, not relation to your accomplishments, people doing the first panel on the zeitgeist of this area, essentially, they demanded you be a member of that panel, since you are the ultimate zeitgeist person. And so, when you finish speaking, you're going to invite the other panelists on zeitgeist to come up and join you. So don't leave the stage.
Okay.
That's it for that.
Very much. Thanks for the generous intro. It's great to see all of you. Good to see Patrick and Lily here, who partner in crime on so many fronts. Yeah, so I just want to give a quick overview of Cintrifuse, which runs this amazing building. This was actually really a beer hall, like what, 150 years ago or so. And now it's this great, fantastic kind of entrepreneurial community space in the heart of one of the coolest neighborhoods on the planet, in my view. And so, okay, so Abby, let's just jump ahead here. I wanted to make sure. Oh, I know the sound. Go ahead and play this. I will try to sing to it, but this is just a quick kind of video vignette. Let's see what we'll play. No, okay. So, okay, jump ahead, please. So I want to give a shout out to the folks that helped us on a Saturday to put this together. Abby at the back is our events manager. She's doing an amazing job, and she's got all sorts of great visions for how to take advantage of this incredible building, and it's available for events. Okay, and then John, I think he's out in the front of the door. So hopefully I'll get him up here to say a few words, but he is my partner in crime on really building the startup culture. And one of the handouts that I put on your seat was every quarter we'll kind of update a kind of a top 30 list. I don't think I got all 30 on the list, but I just wanted to give you a taste for the types of startups that we're supporting. And of course, we support everybody who walks through the door, but there's we're clearly trying to make sure that the top 30 really kind of take off to the next level, get to unicorn status. So okay, so the quick overview on Cintrifuse. It's a really I mean, every city has an economic development division. Everybody's kind of trying to get startups. I think what's fundamentally unique about Cintrifuse is that it's a bit of a trifecta between startups, corporates, and kind of a fund of funds model. It kind of came to bear about 10 years ago. McKinsey came here, did a big study, looked around at all the different groups and sort of said, okay, what would it take to really ignite a tech-based innovation economy? And they came up with a model that had a bit of a grocery store of services for startups, but it also had they recommended a fund of funds model where we would take money from our top corporates, P&G, Kroger, Western and Southern, some smaller individual investors, and then we would roll it into a fund of funds model where we would invest in the world's top venture capital firms. You're familiar with a lot of them: Upfront Ventures, Greycroft, Mapron, Madrona, some local firms like Refinery, and that would give us access to technology connections, relationships, partly to kind of help the big cos modernize, kind of take their own step change to the future, but ideally over time, heighten connections and visibility into local deal flow. And so how do we, and then in fact, quite a bit of that's happened. One of the things that we pay attention to is what we call the fund multiples. So every dollar we invest in the fund, how much of it comes back to Cincinnati. And it's done pretty well. I think we're now taking a fresh look at the model to figure out how we make that work in an even kind of bigger, bolder way. But as I think about kind of my critical focus areas, this is kind of the chart I share with my board. Every meeting, we're trying to load more capital and talent to our innovation ecosystem. And as I think you can tell through your brief tour so far, it's just getting, we're in a much better position to do that now. I mean, we just have, Jack was describing, my coming down to OTR 20 years ago, and I thought it was really cool back then, but the infrastructure and the talent base and even the universities are just in a much better position to create something truly magic. The other thing I'm focusing on, and I have a relatively new boss who's the head of growth at Procter & Gamble, is, how do we, and it's just why I wanted to share that list with you, is that, how do we cultivate the next program? We know that if we can get a couple of unicorns here, they're going to have graduates that start companies, and it's just going to build a much more experienced talent base. And I would say that Columbus is pretty strong on that in areas like fintech. Saw a little bit of that in Pittsburgh, and I think Cincinnati's well positioned for it, but I would say that we're not quite there yet. We've got quite a few prospects, including one in the back room that we know is going to take off in a big way. And then the third area, this is kind of speaks to that article that I shared with you, which actually isn't an article from today. That's an article 5 years from now that I wrote to really envision what could be if we concentrate. We really think about areas where kind of a concentration of capital, technology, and talent can create a huge competitive advantage. So I've been really thinking about how do we focus in a few areas like fintech, like supply chain and sustainability, where it's clearly where the puck is moving in terms of investment, but there are also areas where the region has incumbent strengths. So we have a lot of banks and insurance companies, and they're kind of in that disrupt or be disrupted mode. And to their credit, they have really embraced fintech. We've got this big initiative called FinTech Frontier. Was part of that, and we're really trying to cultivate as many fintechs, both organically and even having them scale up here. And the banks and insurance companies have kind of pledged to almost give them an unfair advantage. Like we will work with them more aggressively if they hang out here in Cincinnati. And then the other big one is just sustainability. And that one's interesting because for a couple of reasons. Number one, like one of the biggest surprises for me when I got to Cincinnati, guys looking under the hood, trying to figure out what are the strengths. Remarkably progressive on the sustainability front. Like actually one of the top rated cities in the country on areas like new builds, leads, much more progressive. You kind of think Boulder, you think San Francisco, you think Bend, Oregon, you don't think Cincinnati, but when you look at the data, it's really quite remarkable. And then the other part that's interesting is that you've got market leaders like Procter and Kroger, and they're real market leaders. I mean, Procter's the world's biggest advertiser, Kroger's the world's third largest grocer, and they are establishing industry standards. And they're putting out really aggressive moonshot goals on everything from future packaging to zero waste, and that is a big opportunity for us to kind of leverage their firepower combined with startup, kind of can do, change the world, and kind of create a really, really strong connection. So that's one of the reasons I'm really kind of pushing on that. And then the other thing we do is we just do a lot of programming. So we're really trying to inspire a lot of entrepreneurs, and I think I have a couple of examples. Try to keep slides to a minimum. Jump ahead, Abby. Just oh yeah. So here's our list of top 30. One of the biggest ones you've probably been reading about lately, and I absolutely love this firm, is 80 Acres Farms. They're kind of in that hydroponics, vertical farming space. Really interesting story of an entrepreneur that's kind of done quite a few private equity. There's actually two of them, Mike Zelkine and Tisha Livingston, and they kind of have been this dynamic duo that have, and now they're kind of really trying to corner this area. And they just got another $160 million, including from General Atlantic. They also got early money from Barclays Rise Fund, which is really progressive. I mean, they're doing some of the smartest things in the world on sustainability. And so, and my prediction is that, don't tweet me saying this, I think they're gonna roll up the category. The economics of doing it in the Midwest are off the charts. And so if you kind of look at 80 acres versus plenty, which Jeff Bezos put a lot of money in, there's like, it's very tough to scale those types of businesses with West Coast economics. You come to the Midwest, what I call the Great Supply Way, and you have this huge opportunity in there. They started actually in Union Hall. They're now up in Hamilton and scaling very quickly, but their facility is one of the most advanced indoor farming facilities. And they're on track to become a unicorn. And I'm excited about them becoming a unicorn because I predict there's going to be a dozen kind of like, kind of a sustainable startups that kind of come out of that. But there's quite a few. If you ask me, and Ann and I were talking about this after I took this job, I was kind of like looking around and man, not a lot of venture money coming in. It was pretty thin. And now it's starting to look really encouraging. And I'm particularly bullish about fintech and sustainability as really big drivers there. Okay, jump ahead, let's see what else I got. Examples of programming, really trying to, that's a great example. Like Tim Spence will probably be the next CEO of Fifth Third. He's the president now. With venture investor, that's what we try to do. We try to put the top executives with venture investors or with the small startups to really kind of make that connection. But we're doing a ton of that. In fact, I think if you jump ahead, I think we've got a pitch competition. Spread the word. One of the biggest prize loots in the country, like $75,000, and we're going to take pitch entries from all over the country. And again, it's kind of our way of saying, and we'll create lots of incentives if they win to come to Cincinnati. But that's an example where we're dangling out carrots, sponsored by the big co's, and really trying to lure that talent in every way that we can. Okay. And then this is just the, take the article, read it, but the vision I see in 5 years is that, if we do everything right, I do believe we can build the world's great green supply way. We already are the great supply way. We're actually one of the top, supply chain and logistics hubs in the country. We are, I know it sounds crazy to say that you believe this, is that when you add up Amazon, DHL, the fact that Kroger has gone from number 10 to number 5 in e-commerce. When you add Wayfair, we are the #1 e-commerce distribution hub in the country. I'll say that again, we are the #1 e-commerce distribution hub in the country. Unofficially, we're the largest sorter in the world. I can't say that officially, but it is true. And our airport's one of the fastest growing airports in the country. And it's a great metaphor of Midwest can do. That airport was left for dead. It was a butt of all jokes 10 years ago. When I went to, I literally wasn't sure it was going to exist when I came back from Switzerland. And all of a sudden, great example of an entrepreneurial CEO, kind of broke all the rules, literally called up Jeff Bezos, said, come on down. Amazon literally now has like a third of the real estate. They're bringing world-class technology. It's creating a whole advanced supply chain corridor. It's not just low-wage jobs. It's a whole spectrum of jobs. And now, and I'm kind of hoping, you'll see in that article, I'm kind of hoping that we can actually convince Amazon to move most of its sustainable technology down to greater Cincinnati, which I think is really possible because the biggest innovators in sustainability, e-commerce, right? Because that's where you have extreme challenges and all sorts of political pressure and regulatory pain. That's where things innovate the fastest. And so that's one reason why I'm super bullish. So lots of potential there. We do something called Startup Cincy Week. That's coming up at the end of October. You can tune into that online, but just a lot of things going on. I think the word to take forward outside is that this community is so incredibly receptive of startup culture. We're pretty humble about what we are and what we aren't, but there's a big hunger. And I think there's a real passion in key areas, whether it's sustainability and impact areas, sustainability, equity and diversity, and then really, public-private partnerships, which I think you kind of see as you kind of walk around the streets here, but lots of potential, and we would love to get you involved. Any questions, comments? Anybody want to sign up for the Great Supply Way? I won't leave the stage until I get at least one question. It can't be from him. Well, it can be from him, but she served the rap many times. Yes.
Can you provide any more color? Thank you for this.
Yeah.
Can you provide a little more color on what you're looking for in terms of typical startups that you support, sweet spot, and what type of investments you make, stage?
Yeah. Well, the Cintrifuse Fund doesn't. We do a few direct investments, but I would say about 95% of what we have done to date has been indirect through other funds. That said, we are developing a Fund 3 strategy, and we're actually deliberately taking it quite slow as we really grapple with that. Where can we really drive impact? And I am like 90% confident that when the press release comes out, it will probably be much more direct focus, and it will be very focused on some of those areas of strength. And that will require that we bring fund management that really knows fintech and sustainability or supply chain. And we'll have a vision. We'll have to think about what stage we want to focus on, but it will probably be seed, Series A. But so we would actually kind of play a much bigger direct, fund activity. We'll continue to have services for startups. And I don't know if John made it up here. I feel bad. John's guarding the door. But John does all the heavy lifting on with the startups. If you walk through the door and you've got a great idea, you may just have a couple members of your team. They'll help you with concept development, legal stuff. We got a relationship with EY that will kind of help operationalize a bunch of services. Mentor network, and we're linked to all these other groups. I mean, you're hearing about Cintrifuse, but there's this whole satellite of fantastic accelerators and incubators that kind of map to what we do. So we're like crowd routers, and we'll find experts like Ann and others who might parachute in and not only advise, they might become strategic investors or members of the board. But so one of the things I think we can do a better job of is just getting a bit more. I think about it Nestle, we are kind of really scientific about mapping the consumer journey, and then delivering personalization at scale. And I think we're trying to figure out how do we do that for, when a startup kind of walks in, how do we almost like scientifically wrap the relevant services around them and kind of send them off to glory. And I think we do a reasonably good job of that, but I think there's probably a huge opportunity to develop like what one of my former colleagues called startup GPS. Right. Yeah.
Do I understand that you still invest in the venture fund itself as a fund, and there's no specific requirement that those companies be funded in Cincinnati? Is that right?
It's definitely, you can't require it. It's definitely part of the, it's part of the understanding, but this is like, this is the area that we kind of pull our hair out, right? So you're kind of sending money out, and, and part of the challenge is, you kind of need startups that are kind of meet their criteria. So I think that, if we had a bigger pool, I think right now we're kind of in a better position to seduce some of their dollars with the startups that we have. I think in the past that's been a bit trickier. But the reality is that, a lot of these funds, contrary to what we assume, they still kind of gravitate most of their activity on the coast.
It would seem to me, if we believe what's written up there, that we are less expensive and we have talent and we have areas of expertise, that we should be able to corral that energy and keep it in Cincinnati.
Well, we need to do a much better job of selling ourselves. And the fund mechanism alone is not going to do that. I mean, I personally think that, we have some, as you're going to learn, there's some of these fantastic assets in Cincinnati, but we almost have too much. I'm kind of one of those, like just, I'm not I'm not 100% sure that sustainability is the only strength, but I'm a big believer in focus. So don't, just pick a couple areas that people can understand and just do it really, really well. And then be inclusive about the rest. And I do think that like Cincinnati has huge opportunity. I mean, what's great about this town, and I'm from California, Southern California, I went to school in Santa Cruz. It's like I have no business being here. But I'm also an opportunistic entrepreneur. I love being on the ground floor. And, I kind of discovered hidden treasure here, fantastic people. This downtown is like better than any European city that I, visited while I was invested. Who wouldn't want to be close to this? But you got to discover it. You have to see it. So our big challenge is trial. And we've got to get people to just like set foot here. And I think that's one area where the fund mechanism has worked. Like every VC, we brought hundreds of VCs here. They're all shocked. They can't believe it. And that's always a good starting point. And then hopefully, they'll kind of embark upon other discovery.
Well, I want to just for the record.
Yeah.
We're a venture capital fund, which was successful. And we had one company that was 20 times our money. And most of the rest lost all of our money. And it was a Cincinnati.
That was the Cincinnati company.
Yeah, and no surprise, it was a marketing company, Procter & Gamble. So there are jewels here that would be great if you can convince people to focus on it.
Like the other thing we need to figure out is, and I don't want to overstress Procter, right? Like it's kind of almost like disproportionate attention, but a lot of people who leave Procter, it's an upper out culture, people leave and they scatter out across the coast. And how do you almost convince them like, hey, it's a much better deal coming down the street to Cintrifuse than it is like going to the West Coast? So how do you build those flywheels of talent? Or if you know that Ann Rooney's going to go to the West Coast, how do you just think about the 5-year plan, which is like, okay, at some point she's going to come back and she wants to live like a king here and probably get more done. Is that good?
Good.
All right, so I'm staying on stage or I'm
Not
okay.
speech yet.
Yeah, you can't
All right.
drive.
What's that?
Uh,
Okay.
So the first panel will focus on zeitgeist. And Pete, everything that you say in the context of this panel should be different from what you just said, so
Okay.
it's not boring or repetitive. And other participants will include Eric Lindbergh, who lives in Dallas, has been in the major cities of the country, including New York, for an extended period of time. He, after growing up here, went up to fine liberal arts school, old-fashioned liberal arts, and he's excited to return home to a city that he once knew. And interestingly, has increasingly observed, Eric, how it has transformed itself. And you're a good witness of the empirical evidence that supports how the place has changed, and it must have a zeitgeist that is different today than it was before. Adding to the panel with Eric and Pete will be, where's Matt? Matt, you're there. You have the distinction of having lived in Minneapolis, thought it was a primo place, came here and discovered that this might even be better if you can explain how and why. You've been here several years now. Just one. Make it one. And that's long enough to be able to make observations and comment
For sure.
in the context of this subject. And added to the panel, Mohsen, your story, let me see if I can put it in a sentence. You're Pakistani, grew up there, ran some real estate businesses in other parts of the world, France, the UK, Middle East, and went to college in Toronto.
Right.
And somehow moved to Los Angeles because we thought it would be a cool place to start a real estate business. Somebody 6 years ago said to you, why don't you take a close look at the flyover area, and how about specifically Ohio? You and your wife fell in love with not only Ohio, but Cincinnati, and you're now running a startup here in this locale that will be global in its reach. And based on what I've heard you say, you're never ever going to leave. So there must be something about the zeitgeist that prompts you to want to be here that you could articulate once you get up here on the stage. And else, let's say, from panel, the answer, Stephen Burke. Stephen, do you know that you're on this panel? And
I heard when I got here.
And the zeitgeist to which you can speak has more to do with the American culture and its transformation and how it's manifesting itself in the public markets, which you study every day. And that is the panel. Stephen, Eric, Mosen, Pete, Matt, and see what you can convey that's worth taking notes, remembering, and acting upon in the future. You know, there is a need, there is a need for people in the audience to develop some meaningful takeaways. Go ahead.
And Steve, wait, it's 4:08.
What time do you want me to?
What time would you like to end?
What time does the game start?
Oh, just 7:10.
I actually posted no slides, I'll be done.
What time is the cocktails?
They start at 5 o'clock. Listen,
We're kind of hoping.
in the event,
Yeah.
listen,
Yeah.
in the event anybody's engaged in long-range planning, we have a surprise guest coming at 5 o'clock, whose identity we'll reveal in a couple of minutes before 5. And that person is going to speak not on the itinerary, hence the word surprise applies. We have another surprise later tonight at the ballpark. And that'll be one of America's sports heroes. But that's about 7 or 7:30. This happens to be now. And if you finish in 30 minutes, we could then see if the second panel wants to step up, and if they don't, you may be forced to stay longer.
Well, I'm sure with this crowd we'll go all day.
Go ahead.
So it's, the world has a little something for everybody right now, unless you want yield, which there isn't. Global interest rates, short rates moved up to 0.9 from 0.6 not too long ago. So if you want something for yield, you have to go into areas that take on a little more risk. But we're in a really wacky environment with something that we have political issues everywhere with a lot of leadership changes coming globally, particularly in Europe. But you also have the dynamics, geopolitical dynamics between the US and China and a lot of the rest of the world, and US and France now, France and Australia. There's something for everybody on that side too. But I really want to talk about 3 things. The liquidity that's been put out there in the global system, certainly in the US, and is continuing to be promoted. I want to talk about global debt that's associated with that, and then also the area that I'm most excited about, which is all these great innovations that we talk about on the venture side, like Cintrifuse is doing, because I'm of the belief that we haven't seen the real move in technology changing our lives like we will over the next 10 years. So I think we're in a very exciting time, a very challenging time, and it's a time where we need real leaders. And unfortunately, I think there's a lot of political issues that are not being led by statesmen or stateswomen. And I would say we're losing probably the best leader in the world, in my view, which is Angela Merkel, who's stepping down. I think she's been a very steady influence on the global economy and on the global political situation. And I think that's going to be a big challenge for a lot of the areas, because we have so many things changing going on. But we had a debt problem in 2008 that we solved by taking debt up from around a little over $200 trillion globally to 296 trillion now. So we solved the debt problem by layering on a third more debt to the global system. And that has a problem which will come later on, but is coming now because we're suppressing the rates of the central banks. But the bill comes due, and we're going to have to worry about that. And to fix that, we are going to have the productivity improvements that are going to drive the country and the global economy forward, that allows us to manage the debt effectively by growing our, having the growth that can offset the rise in rates and interest for us, because a lot of this debt's going to have to be refinanced at higher rates in a later date. So I think there's some real issues that we have, but when you turn around and think about the innovations that you're going to hear from on this tour that we've heard over the last couple of days in Chicago, in Detroit, in Ann Arbor, we have a world that is going to be so amazing. You think about what our kids have gone through. I have 420 somethings, and they grew up in a world that they didn't have an iPhone when they were born, but we're 2 billion iPhones in now. Think about that, from 07 to now, 2 billion iPhones. And we're just going through a transformation digitally that's going to change our lives. In the US, the big element for that, not only in the US but globally, is the productivity improvements are being reflected through this digital transformation and lower costs. And as we get this right, and you're talking about the ability to reach so many people with e-commerce and the way we're doing it now, it's changing the way we live, work, and govern. And I think the governing part has to catch up, and I think we're way behind, and I think that's going to be one of the big challenges. Last thing I want to touch on is the increase of the debate around the $3.5 trillion on top of the $1 trillion infrastructure. I'm not sure where it ends up. I think it'll be a lower number, but we need a lot of that. But we need it without all the political nonsense going on between the two parties. We have to focus on the things we can fix, and enable the country to do what it can do, which is innovate and grow and change for the better. I think we just have to do more of that. We need the leaders that are going to really step up. So I'm going to stop there.
Can I say, so that's kind of a nice macro sort of global look at economic forces, sort of focusing on Cincinnati zeitgeist. So I got this. This is a question that I'm sort of Cincinnati. These three guys are purely Cincinnati. Does that mean anything for regional, sort of regional differentiation?
I think one of the issues that it means for regional is what's going on in China, and what started with the trade wars is continuing this reorientation of global supply chains, and the need for resilience and the need for just-in-time supply chains is got to change, and we're going to have a whole reconnection of the way the global economy works. And I think the Midwest is going to be the beneficiary of it because of all the reasons that you're talking about: lower costs, great skills, and the climate issue is going to push a lot more into the Midwest too. And you're going to start a business and build your manufacturing plants in Florida. They're having trouble with the sea levels there. So I think the Midwest is uniquely positioned for it. I think you need a different marketing program to attract people here. And I think you need to get more groups like this coming through, and you'll see it change. But this is a place where you can build stuff and get it distributed in an incredible way. As you said, 100 million people in no time, one day. Is that the number? And when you can do that, and you get the manufacturing behind it, you can take that number up, and you'll have a real change going on. And I think the Midwest will be the primary beneficiary of that.
And so I don't mean to become the sort of the moderator, but like just I am the pot stirrer sometimes. This is a little bit of more of like this is sort of a Cincinnati focused question, and I don't not just specifically for you, but in my experience, having been someone that grew up here but has lived elsewhere for several decades, in a lot of different visitors, I have a positive and a negative about Cincinnati that I'll just throw out there, and then I'll shut up and let the guys who really do things. So for you, maybe say some more things about this geography. And Jack and I were talking about this earlier. I think that people who don't have a significant amount of time in Cincinnati don't fully understand almost like a local patriotism and the strength of the local culture. And Jack and I were talking, and I have a complaint. I think that really dates back. I think there is a continuous thread to the early part of the 19th century when residents of Cincinnati called this the Queen City and really believed this was going to be the second most important metropolitan area in the country because of the importance of all of the river freight and all of the port processing. And this was truly the second most important metropolitan area. And because of perhaps short-sighted political decision making at that time, the opportunity to have a railroad hub here was skipped, and it went to Chicago, which then changed the sort of all these things. But I think there is a continuous cultural thread here back to that time that leads people who grew up in Cincinnati don't think of this as a city that punches far above its weight. I think you go to New York and ask people about what's the profile of Cincinnati. Oh, who knows? Like some small Midwestern city that I fly over, I connect there once, and they had chili in there. Like that's what they know. But I think people in Cincinnati would tell you like, well, we have P&G and we have West, we have all these, but like people in Cincinnati, they perceive it as punching psychologically far above its weight. And there's therefore sort of a confidence and a gumption about risk-taking and starting businesses that creates the environment through that I think is actually really unique relative to the size of the city. Now, this is, I always disclose when I've had a personal experience. We should never extrapolate our personal experience to mean that that is like a statistically significant sample set. But there's one young entrepreneur whose business was really exciting, who started here a number of years ago on Live Eyes, helped out, who a couple of years ago relocated to the West Coast. And it's like very sad, you see it, sort of like, damn, like that's how the business industry really made it. And he left because they could not find enough young people of the right specific sort of designer skill set that the West Coast is full of, that I think that Cincinnati, I think, has a little bit of a, I would say, like a marketing problem in drawing in 20 to 25-year-olds sort of elite workers. So those are just a couple of things to maybe start some conversation around Cincinnati and zeitgeist in specific.
So, Peter, it's okay.
Yeah, please jump in.
Someone who's moved to Cincinnati, who's lived all over the world, who's moved to Cincinnati relatively recent, 7 years ago, with the intention of moving out of there and probably moving there for the term. The initial idea was living there for 1 year, at most 2 years, and then moving back to Albany. You can sell a house there, and move furniture, or any of that. This city is a city that once you live there and you spend enough time here, you fall in love with it. It's not one of those cities that you hear about and it's like, oh, I want to move to Cincinnati. Absolutely right about that. And it, as you pointed out, the marketing issue aspect of maybe the way that news is presented, it is that once you're there and you spend a little bit of time here, you fall in love with it. There's no moving away from it. You have lived in Boston, New York, Toronto, all large cities. Moving to Cincinnati was fairly questionable, right? Starting investments in Cincinnati, which is before that, to make most investments over here. It was surprising for me to learn that in the Midwest, they had folks from Ohio because of some personal ties in Cleveland, but we ended up picking up Cincinnati because they had 17 Fortune 1000 companies within a 20-mile radius of downtown Cincinnati. Not just P&G, there's 16 others. And that P&G is as much as positive, it's also something that pulls Cincinnati down. All the innovation goes to CPG. All the innovation goes at Kroger does the same thing. Now with Cintrifuse making the push for FinTech, with programs like the Frontier, creating a hub and an environment for us to grow. We've got a small group of people that like John, Mark, and other gentlemen from Cintrifuse who are really nurturing this segment as well. And that's really helping us grow. And in terms of talent, we've got a crew. My company has, and without saying that our example is something that can be generalized, I can just tell you my experience. We've got people across the globe. We've got people in 3 different continents, especially post-COVID, moving from one place to the next. I think remote work has gained so much more acceptability that you don't have to move to the West Coast, or you don't have to move to New York or Miami because they're the FinTech hub or the blockchain hub or the development hub or the design hub. Finding the talent is not difficult. How you get them to move there is then dependent on the government. And as more and more opportunities come up, which there are, and more investors are looking in this space as well, which makes a massive impact, and that helps us grow. We only have one Cincinnati investor as part of our full capital. We're oversubscribed, and that investor is led by Jack and his firm, but it's Queen City Energy, right? So it's great to have them on board, but the reason why we didn't need anyone else over here is because, especially post-COVID, you really get to see it. You work remotely for that. And all of our investors are folks, East Coast and West. It's easily doable. Investors have started to look into the Midwest and have started to find the right opportunities, but you really need to start exploring those aspects.
But yeah, that part that you mentioned about the work from home and the changes that are going on there, it's actually I think part of the marketing challenge. How do you get the message out of why this is a place to live? And coming from New York, it sort of gets easier by the second. So,
I mean, I'm a paid cheerleader in some respects, but let me just kind of, let me kind of dignify some of your comments. I mean, can Cincinnati or even the Midwest be a bit provincial and you have a conservative streak? Absolutely. Yeah, there are kind of echoes of, I'm trying to resurrect this whole great supply way thing, but yeah, we're kind of haunted by that back there. Yeah, I think listen, I'm forever chasing that ideal of the startup dancing with the big company, but damn, that's really hard, and P&G is the big gorilla, but it's you got a thriving startup economy. We have cracked the code on making it really easy for startups to work with big companies, even when the startups really have something, mature and develop. I think it's just, when you're dealing with large enterprises that are kind of built to scale, it's really hard to make that connection. So I think sometimes I'm probably guilty of romancing that, symbiotic relationship. I hope that I get there eventually, but I am finding in fintech that I think there's a willingness that maybe, I do think that's kind of a disruptive sector where I think there's almost an urgency of kind of dancing with fintechs. I just think, I think a lot of these companies here could be severe risk if they do not undergo their own kind of digital transformation. Maybe P&G has a little bit more insulation on that than some of the banks and insurance companies, but yeah, there's a lot. Listen, I think failure is severely punished. I think there's still a lot of, Silicon Valley failure is just like, it's kind of part of the drill here. I think, it's hard when things don't kind of go your way, and I've had that experience myself too. So, so you have to kind of swim against a lot of those currents.
It's good to have organizations like Cintrifuse, and people from or ex-PNGers who decide to stay out there at times to support us, right? So we as a crew, and I use our example again, we were in stealth mode, then when we got out of it, the only people who knew about us were on the coast. We didn't know anyone in the Cincinnati startup community, no one in the Cincinnati startup community about us. Lo and behold, I was introduced to John Slider, the COO for Cintrifuse, and not only did they make it easier for us to get involved in the Cincinnati startup community, and they introduced us to everyone, and that's what made sure I support Cincinnati's not just a great place to live, but also to grow the startup but also open the doors for us for a lot of the larger financial institutions. First Financial is someone who we're speaking with, the CEO, CFO, the top level folks, just purely because of Cintrifuse. The decision makers, where transactions are happening a lot faster because of such organizations. I think getting the word out there, and for folks like you, whether you want to grow a business in Cincinnati or invest in Cincinnati, it will be, it's integral for an organization like Cintrifuse to exist, and the services that they provide, I think, are just absolutely valuable.
God, I hope that camera's working. I said that to my boss right now.
I'm a big proponent for Cintrifuse any given point of time. I'm not saying it because we're at the office. I say that all the time. I was introducing someone, John, downstairs as well. And you guys downstairs right now are saying the same thing. It's like, hey, this is how Cintrifuse has worked out for us. Always a big role.
I also think there's a big edge even against other Midwest states because the financial positions of some of those other states are in the position that Ohio's in. And add to that, what Jobs Ohio is creating is really the kind of public-private partnerships that economies need to grow. And when I came out with the advanced tour, we met in June. We all left, all the people going back to New York, left saying, this is incredible what they have here, nobody knows that. And I think getting the story out, people will come here if we get the messaging right. But we have so many things, even against other Midwestern states, that I think is a big advantage that has to be part of the story.
The Jobs Ohio one is important because, it's important even for me in my role to kind of toggle between this greater Cincinnati narrative to a state of Ohio narrative. And frankly, the state of Kentucky narrative has probably done more to kind of give momentum to the greater Cincinnati narrative. You know, when I first started this job, I thought it was, you know, Procter & Gamble was going to be the center of the universe in the energy field, but it's actually our airport. I mean, our airport is the undisputed, you know, catalyst of so much fresh thinking about the future of supply chain, future of sustainability, great green supply-way, and then even biofuels. I mean, I predict our airport is going to be the global leader in the transformation of biofuels, and partly because you've got, you know, Amazon's under massive pressure to figure that out. They just moved the, I mean, the regulatory climate is interesting. That's like a big opportunity. On one hand, people say that's a headache, but the reason why Europe's kicking our butts in green is because the EU really got pretty aggressive on that. And so that's why like a lot of Procter money is in Germany, not locally. But now you've got US regulatory, all these climate commitments just on the biofuels for planes. The target, like 10 days ago, moved from 2050 to 2030 for a 50% target biofuels. I mean, that's going to keep both big companies and startups really, really busy. And so what we need to figure out is like, oh, if this bar has been set, you know, who's going to have this right to compete? And I think the Midwest is in a fantastic position. But we'll need to kind of, think about how you wrap a strategy around it, almost depoliticize some of these issues. A lot of people talk green, you suddenly get these like Democrat, forget that. This is where the money is going without question. I mean, I always keep thinking if I can just get 10% of what I know Kroger has to spend based on everything they're writing in ESG reports, if I can localize 10% of that spend, I will quadruple my startup economy. And that's the way we need to think. So like, what do these commitments mean? I'm getting rid of plastics. You know, I have, it's like, okay, who's going to solve that issue? And just pounce on it.
I hope you're right. We got 250 acres with our company right up next to the airport. So I hope.
Farming it out, I know.
Exactly.
Oh, yeah, Michael.
But I would agree too. This is the Midwest moment that, for the last 30, 40 years, as the supply chain got international, Midwest was really what lost out. All these states and cities just lost their jobs to the international economy. And now that we see what happens with these disruptions, kind of everything's coming back. And you're starting to see some of the moment shine, and particularly, I think, being advanced with COVID in a really twisted sort of way, where it's forced companies to allow that remote work where you don't have to be in the dense cities and you don't have to have all the drawbacks that come with the density, and you can come here and live well, you can send your kids to state schools, and you do all the things that this place has to offer. Maybe it's because I'm a Midwestern guy. I grew up in Milwaukee, I lived in Minneapolis for 15 years, now I'm here in Cincinnati. But I think, being able to compare and contrast among those cities too has been really good. For me in Milwaukee, growing up there, we always just had a chip on our shoulders, the younger, uglier sibling in Chicago. And
We're not just
and in Minneapolis, great city, wonderful city, but in many ways it felt like you were 6 hours from anything. And here it feels like you're 6 hours from everything. And so you just really have this kind of wonderful central area, and really just working together to bring opportunities here. We work with Ready Cincinnati as we've had opportunities for real estate to fill buildings, and to be able to rely on them to tap resources that we don't know about to help our tenants get bigger and expand. And we've done that. We'll start with a 5,000 square foot tenant, and all of a sudden they grow to be half of a building, and then we fill them up into another building and grow with them. So it's been helpful to see that. And I think locally, as being the outside guy, part of I think where the city could get better, and where I've seen it, is I think when it comes to bringing opportunities here, the regional area is really good about working together. But I've seen a little bit of tribalism where you're either, if you're south of the river, or if you're north of the river, and if you're north of the river, then you're east side or the west side, or if you're south of the river, you might have this county versus that county. So there's this tribalism that regionally, they'll compete with one another. It's like the United States, you know, they fight with one another all the time, but when somebody attacks America, they unite as Americans. It's the same thing here where, you know, if you're fighting, you can fight amongst yourselves, but the moment something happens outside, no, we'll pull together and we're gonna bring everybody.
And it came to a boil with that crazy bridge, right? You know, I mean, now it looks like they're finally gonna break through, but that was like the metaphor for, you know, regional gridlock, you know, petty gridlock. I think your point about, you know, post-COVID, you know, supply chain realities, I mean, supply chains, you know, had to become much more resilient. I think a big pressure on localization of supply chains. And I think the green stuff is going to put massive pressure on that. The things that we took for granted, like when I was working at Nestle, shipping Pellegrino water from Italy, you know, I just think that 5 years from now, people are, the kids, our kids are just consuming like drugs. Like why? It's like, why would you ever do that? You know, and so you're just gonna have a lot of fresh thinking about, you know, locals. It's not like we're gonna become provincial, but I do think, yeah, the way we build supply chain is gonna change.
Great best opportunity.
Huge opportunity. You think about like Kroger's like really into 80 acres. Why? They love that model. I mean, they're committed to fresh. That's their big slogan. What is 80 acres all about? Oh, we'll put one of your high-tech pods in the back of your store. We'll literally grow the salads right there. And you will get that immediately. That gives them, you know, much longer shelf space, fresher food. I mean, it's like, so you've got, and that's a classic example of reinventing the supply chain, leveraging technology, harnessing great entrepreneurs, and doing it in the Midwest.
Midwest. That's where you're gonna do it, right?
The FinTech revolution.
There's a strategist out of New York, Nancy Lazar's very well-known economist, rated one of the highest, and she's had a theme for several years. The Midwest is the best emerging market in the world, and I think that's going to bear out over the next couple of years because of the reasons we're talking about, supply chains, the China problems, everything. We just have to dial down the political rhetoric and put the focus on being productive and looking forward. That may be a challenge for that.
Well, no, we'd be remiss in talking about Cincinnati zeitgeist. For anyone who's not from Cincinnati, Oprah, no one less than Oprah says the greatest ice cream in the world is made in the city, and it's available right down the street. So I do encourage you, there are some local culinary treats. And then Gold Star or Smiling.
I do know.
Oh, you do know? Oh, I should never underestimate you.
I prefer the phone to start, so. Yeah, I spend 2 weeks every summer growing up in Cincinnati.
Oh, there we go.
I know they sold this on coming here in August, which I left the beaches of Long Island to come to Cincinnati for 2 weeks, but it was fabulous and people are wonderful. So I would encourage people to learn more about it if you haven't. If you're not from here, you're outside investor. This is a place to start looking.
And I kind of connect that back to some of those food traditions. I connect back to this thing I said about like these long cultural threads relative to anywhere else I've ever been. And when you talk about like the neighborhood tribalism, I remember growing up here, it's like, oh man, like if you're in Anderson, you know, Western Hills is in the end, there's like this long, like very, very strong cultural traditions in Cincinnati that I don't see other places in the US, which make it an interesting place to be business. So a lot of good relationships.
You're absolutely right. So when we moved to Cincinnati, in my family, one thing we figured out was when people ask us, where did you go to school? They're not asking what college you go to school to, they're asking what high school you go to school. So that goes into that whole capitalism, you know, whether you're from the east side or the west side, or you're from Forest Hills or Muller or from San X or wherever you want to school. But once you break into that, I think one of the biggest things is once you get a part of that tribe, once you become part of the tribe, what kind of access you have in this city, you cannot have anywhere else. And that's what makes it so unique and so special. Whether that tribe is Cintrifuse or that tribe is the folks with Anderson or that tribe is Cincinnati City Council or the state of Ohio. I don't think the biggest selling point of the Midwest is the fact that it's the cost of living is so low. I disagree with that statement. Other than the house, everything else is more expensive in the Midwest than on the coast. But it's the access, it's the price of that access, it's the ability to have that access, which really changes things. And that's what's so unique.
Hey, I wanted to give my colleague John, who was outside guarding the door, but he talks to most of them and hundreds of other entrepreneurs, and I was wondering if you could just weigh in on this conversation. You know, we've been kind of debating both the advantages and some of the disadvantages of Cincinnati as kind of a startup region. Any kind of perspective, and you know, John, like me, actually kind of has kind of California roots, so he's kind of like he stumbled into Cincinnati via the Gillette acquisition, so Boston boy. So, but
Kind of California. Yeah. I grew up in the Bay Area in Los Angeles, and moved here in 2005 when Gillette's company was acquired. No, Cincinnati. Like P&G and Sept and Procter. It's interesting. One of the principal differences I see, I was telecommuting out to San Francisco, once you marketing for an AI startup working on Cintrifuse, is a lot of the entrepreneurs in the Bay Area start with, what can I build that might be worth $1 billion, right? Kind of back into a business from there. Whereas in Cincinnati, more often what I see is kind of deep domain expertise and passion for a particular problem to solve, which, there's pros and cons to each, but in terms of as an investor, looking for people that are going to be kind of a good steward of an early stage investment and really relentlessly, deeply understand their customer base and are going to build for them. I found there's a lot of really compelling founders in early stage companies in Cincinnati. One of the things we lack, or have lacked, or do more of, is people that run the full cycle, that have played a leadership role in starting, scaling, and exiting the startup, right, which is really invaluable. But we have found either those people moving here, starting to build up a more of a base of them, or in some cases, some of the founders are bringing kind of that talent in virtually now in a world of distributed companies. I think it's a fantastic place to invest in early stage companies, and that's not like,
and I handed out to them the top 30 list, or it was like the top 20 list, just to give them a flavor of the companies that are kind of in the.
Curious if I made it up.
yes, of
course.
Yeah.
To see where we stuck.
You wouldn't have been
14, number 16.
Number 19.
Any comments or reactions from on any of this?
Questions? What was that answer? Yeah, because I don't answer your question. I'm sure we're all happy to take some minutes.
So basically, when we talk about more, whether it's drivers, trades, Silicon Valley, other drivers. Yeah. So far, if you're the potential driver, you're very information and support both them and are there any other drivers which you feel distinguish from non-centers in the United States?
I haven't talked a lot about health or biohealth, and partly because I'd say Cintrifuse isn't driving that and supporting it, but there is just a fantastic, like Cleveland, there's just a best-in-class hospital networks. I think UC is really creating a national footprint in health, and I think someone mentioned earlier, Jobs Ohio is just pouring a ton of money into that. And I think there's, we can kind of crack the code of things like IP transfer and continue to kind of build that talent base. I think you're going to see, a lot of waves on that front. I think the key thing is to figure out what aspects, obviously health is a very broad category, but where, I think a lot about connected health. I'm such a digital guy. I think that space is just ending COVID kind of, put that on steroids. And so is there an area to kind of play there? But, huge opportunity there. We often talk about future branding in retail, although I think to some extent it kind of is already, you know, it's funny, if you talk to someone like Kroger and say, are you a fintech company, or are you, you know, food company, or are you a health company? They'll look at you and they'll say, yes. You know, so there's a lot of blurring in these categories.
I think one of the biggest drivers over here is that the corporate sector that requires a CPG innovation, and the health sector, where you see in Cincinnati, driving up a lot of the health, not education, the growth within the health sector and the development and innovation in that sector. So I think one of those combined is what's really driving a lot of that. Top tech is something which is really emerged out of Cincinnati. Whether you look at Dunkin', which started acquired by So, you know, when you look at auction.com with some roots from there as well.
Picasso has roots here.
Picasso has roots here as well. So product is definitely something that's taken on.
So is it so, why so little?
I'm sorry.
If it is so good, why so little? You have five big names.
I'm talking about five of the top within the industry. We believe in quality and not quantity. It's the biggest thing on that. So for instance, for us, for a group to be based out of, I take it back to my company, for a group to be based out of Cincinnati is out of those 17 Fortune 1000 companies that I talked about earlier. We've got a large number of financial institutions, and we've got a large number of insurance companies that are based there, that are driving that, and having the access to those with the right kind of approach and the right intention that, or them being in the right mindset to drive innovation in this sector really helps us out. If we were based in LA, or if we were based in San Fran, or if we were based in New York, we would have a lot more realistic clients over there would be willing to jump on, but not on the institutional side. So if you really wanted to expand, if you really want to grow in the real estate, institutional real estate world, getting some of those big names behind you makes it a lot easier if you have them pretty on. And that kind of access, goes back to what I was talking about earlier, that access to that, to those segments really changes.
So are you saying that proportionally more local startups have access to the companies, the local companies, not companies from Silicon Valley or from other regions?
I'm sorry.
Are you saying that proportionally more most local startups get adopted by the local corporates than startups from other regions?
So it's not that more local.
It's mixed.
It's not that more local startups get adopted, but if you're a local startup, you definitely have an unfair advantage over global. And if you were using that, if you intend on utilizing any of those Fortune 1000 companies for whatever business sector you're in, they can really prop up that initial growth that you need to achieve that global segment.
Jack, did we go over enough? We got along as long as we need.
We want you to go over just a little bit more, please.
Perfect. So we need some more questions.
And I'll put another issue on the table. I mean, obviously you can tell from the panel here, right? The other opportunity is we just got to drive much more diversity in the founder profile. And I think we're making some headway. And we need to also think about like what there may be some drivers that disproportionately impact founder pools. I mean, I'm particularly excited about sustainability because if you look at the numbers across that sector, much more diverse profile. We're seeing some pockets of that on the fintech side, but and there's some other big, and I mean, Cincinnati, I think, has really developed. I think it's always been there, but I think it's really starting to get much more organized around, commitment to D&I. There's like huge funds that are being created at the small business level, and I think we need to figure out how to turn that into a real competitive advantage at a time when Procter is seeking new audiences, Kroger is setting targets for diverse workplace. But I think that's like an area where I would volunteer. We have a long way to go, but a ton of opportunity if we get organized and approach it with a sense of urgency.
Hey, how is the state doing keeping the students who graduate from the universities here? And
I don't know the stats. I don't, John, you may have more of a perspective on it. I don't think it's I think it's good, but not great. I don't think it's a big crisis. I mean,
All I would say in terms of my observations on the labor market, the past 2 years, or 18 months, whatever it is, it's different than it was before. I've onboarded a good number of startups that have pulled up stakes from New York, San Francisco, LA. Here, we've seen kind of the FANG employees given the freedom of location. If they have roots or they have family that has roots, they just sort of land up at in Cincinnati. So Blank was like literally 15 times as many Google employees here. Not because Google wanted them here, but because they were sort of set free. They landed.
I don't think it's again, going back to my earlier comment about the journey, I don't think it's a bad thing at all that our talent works wherever after they graduate. I think the key is that they know that when they're ready to come back, that there is in fact an ecosystem here, and that's most don't. I mean, we did a program called Entrepreneurs Change the World, and it's kind of focused on high schoolers and college kids, and it was really a trial tool. It's sort of like, okay, we know you're not going to go out and raise money right now, but we almost want to give you an early exposure to this fantastic ecosystem. So you got to keep that in the back of your head. And if you end up going to Europe, you go to the West Coast, at some point you're going to say, gosh, if I want to do a company, this is the natural best place to do it. And so, and I do think there's, if a grad goes to Silicon Valley for a while, I think that could be a fantastic plus. All external focus is good for startups, right? You don't stick around in one location forever too long.
Correct me if I'm wrong, Cincinnati is the only city in Ohio that's grown, in the census, right? Grown by 3%. And that's because of the innovation in the city market. There's a whole positive and whether it's new people moving into the state, into the city.
It's also why you corrected us on our real estate comment.
It's very, the growth in the city is extremely important for the growth and innovation in the city. So, while bringing on talent, I'm the first one hiring people remotely. We just hired our head of capital markets in Florida. Well, eventually we'll move to Cincinnati, but eventually is what it is. Right? That's with hiring every person that we're hiring. It doesn't have to take Cincinnati. But the growing city will eventually get those people moving in. That's what's driving a lot of this growth. Growth is driving innovation, and innovation is driving two-way street.
What else? Anything more singers for us?
It's good time to grab some coffee.
Jack, is there any part of was there a follow-up part of the program, or is it step away? Project time. How do you guys like the stadium?
Fabulous. Awesome.
I mean, that's a great example of something that I think just powers the innovation economy. We have a really tight relationship with FCC, and they love Union Hall, we love them. But that's just bringing an international focus to. It's not that we weren't before, but it just, it's just a fantastic experience, and it further kind of globalizes, the city, and I think that's super important. Stadium system. I just did it great. That's also just a great startup story. I think FCC is one of the best startup stories. It's like popped out of nowhere, relatively, you know, from conception to major league team. I mean, a lot of cities will be like, you know, city, you know, for 10 years before they kind of make that bump, and it happened. And I think part of it was the fans were, you know, everybody was ready. That's almost like the start of metaphor for like embracing, you know, the small initiative and turning it into something really big, almost defying the odds. Jack, what's our guidance?
You want to be relieved of your duty?
Okay, thanks.
So you're finished, we'll apply, and now I'm going to. The special guest for this evening, who will describe now, just so you know, Tom Brown was a pitcher for the Cincinnati Reds, and distinguished himself, put himself in the baseball history on September 16th of 1988, almost about 33 years ago, against the Dodgers here in Cincinnati. Game was finished at 11:58 p.m. There's an argument that I've advanced that that's the single greatest moment in Reds history, which dates back to 1869, the Cincinnati Reds being the first baseball team ever in pro baseball. So long run, 150 plus years. And he accomplished that at a point in time when there had been, prior to that, 16 perfect games in all of baseball. Not one team, all of baseball. Glad you're nodding since you know all about baseball. And interestingly, the number of games that have been played when he accomplished that on that night is 175,200. Skip to 200, round it off. 175,000 games. And therefore, there had been 350,000 times that a perfect game could have been thrown, and it was only thrown 17 times, his being the 17th. Pretty remarkable. The numbers indicate how many moving parts there are, how difficult that is to accomplish. He then went on to play 2 years, well, continue with the Reds, but 2 years later, he and his teammates won the World Series in 4 quick games against Oakland, distinguished himself there, and he's going to go to the game, hang out with us through its entirety, and in addition to the opportunity to be with somebody who's accomplished something noteworthy in the world of sports, as I've just described. But there's a good story. His wife kicked him out of the house that day, not forever, but because he wouldn't clean the garage. And so he went to the ballpark early and stewed. And then there was a rain delay that caused the game to start at 10 rather than 8. And so he stewed more. And as he tells it, you'll hear it, you'll see it, kept looking across at the Dodger pitcher that he had just faced in June. That was September, and had a lot of anxiety about the game, and boom, there it was. There have now been 23 perfect games. That was 33 years ago, obviously, as we just cited. So there have been 23 perfect games ever. And the total number is now up around 210 or so versus that 175. So Tom Browning isn't known the way a Pete Rose or Johnny Bench, Joe Morgan might be, but his accomplishment is arguably unique. Well, by definition, it's unique. The numbers indicate that, and it's special. He's the special guest tonight. The special guest now, about whom you don't know and who's not on the schedule, is Andre Norman. And Andre Norman was, we're changing subjects, so this will be a test of not only IQs but flexibility. Andre Norman got in trouble, was sentenced to over 100 years in prison, was in prison for 14 years, 2 of which were in solitary confinement. He had an epiphany, changed his life, was released from prison after the 14 years rather than the 100 plus, and ended up going to Harvard undergraduate school,
graduated, has since spoken to and been part-time faculty at MIT plus Harvard's Kennedy School and its Divinity School and its business school. Andre now has used his energies under the umbrella of what he calls the ambassador of hope. He spends his time working with young people who faced the same situations that he did, and is in the business of changing lives. He talks to other people, YPO, et cetera, and he's created something called Project Footprints. He deals with resilience, and whether it's for people who happen to have had privilege and are now a little older and go to conferences around the world where he speaks, or whether it's young children who don't have a chance and are facing obstacles. He's working both sides of the street and is one remarkable person. Andre, do you live in Phoenix? Let me ask you a different question. Where do you live?
I have a closet in Atlanta, I have a closet in Richmond, I have a closet in South Carolina, I have a closet in Baltimore.
So you're kind of a person for all seasons. Andre, even though I've been talking about you, why don't we play like you're not here yet? Because I want to indicate. No, don't leave though. No, stay right there. I want to indicate that you're about to be introduced by your colleague, professional friend, John Gray. Now, John has two churches that operate in Atlanta and also Greenville, South Carolina. Plus, he's an associate pastor with the well-known Joel Osteen in Houston, where his mega church operates for a large local constituency as well as online throughout the world. And John, Bob Castellini Jr., who brought you guys here, mentioned to me in passing that you're actually more impressive and smarter than Joel. So that makes it that much more exciting for us to welcome you up here right now.
Well, good afternoon. Today is really significant for me for a couple of reasons. Number one, I was born at Bethesda Oak Hospital on Reading Road, right next to the White Castle. This is my home. My grandmother lived at 3920 Vine Street. Straight up this street, I would take the 78 bus from Government Square and get off and walk straight into her house. I grew up in North Avondale Elementary, Walnut Hills for 2 years, where I failed Latin miserably, and then found my strength at Withrow High School, which is the greatest high school this city has. I graduated in 1991, and then went to college at the College of Worcester, and then came back to the University of Cincinnati before working at the City Gospel Mission not far from here. And it was during that time I found my passion, which is telling people that there's hope outside of this terrestrial existence. That's my particular statement of faith. I say that to say this. I don't believe that there are any accidental relationships, connections, interactions. And today I get to introduce someone who I think is making life better for people who society has thrown away. And I believe that you all in this room represent change agents, and you have the ability through relationships and resources to make life better for other people. So coming home today, I drove back through my old neighborhood, through Avondale, Walnut Hills, driving through downtown, see that Over the Rhine is not the Over the Rhine that I grew up in. It is filled with bars and nice little areas to eat, and I'm not afraid to die walking across the street. But this is still home. My mother still lives not far from Camp Washington chili, which is the best chili this city produces. Thank you. And so I know you guys have a lot of things on your plate, but I want to say that this gentleman has stepped into a system that is designed to literally spit up and chew out underrepresented populations, whether that is people who don't have the financial resources to fight for themselves in the justice system, all the way running the gamut. We could go on and on. I sat in the cabinet room to the right-hand side of President Trump at the cabinet room table, 8 feet from the Oval Office, talking about prison reform. And I was castigated for meeting with the president, but it turns out that that piece of legislation was one of the few bipartisan pieces of legislation that were passed in his 4 years as president. If we really want to change the trajectory of a generation, we have to start right now. Crime is not going anywhere. Gentrification is not going anywhere. And we're not going back to a manufacturing base. And so we need to find ways to help populations that are coming out from incarceration to have hope, a chance at a life that they can add value back into society. For me, Cincinnati is one of the few places that is ripe for explosive growth. If you look at where climate change is taking us, the coasts are in trouble. From the fires on the West Coast to the flooding on the East Coast to the Gulf area, and now La Nina is going to make the drought in the Southwest much worse. Why am I saying that? Because there are going to be sudden population shifts in the next 5 years from the coasts back into the Midwest and away from these large water areas. Cincinnati has as much potential to be an area of explosive population growth. And I think it's going to require people from the Democratic side, the Republican side, and the independent side, and even to put politics away and just think about the humanity of individuals that need help. And so the gentleman that's getting ready to come and speak is close to my heart. And when he said he was coming to my hometown, I had to make it clear, you're wearing a red sack, but I was 3 years old listening to Marty Brennan and Joe Nutsall talk about Joe Morgan and Cesar Geronimo, George Foster, Dave Concepcion, Tony Perez, Pete Rose. That was the big red machine. You don't know nothing about that because you're from Boston. And y'all lost to us in the World Series, so you be blessed. I remember him doing this. Carl Yastrzemski, yeah, he got the home run, but game 7 we won, so you be blessed. We got you. But our Bengals, you know, and the Patriots, that's another story, but we're good.
Listen,
but
there are 3 stars to the show today. You, Andre, and Tom Browning later today, who threw a no-hitter in September of 1988.
It was a perfect game.
Yes.
It did. It was a perfect game. They didn't videotape it back then, the whole thing. And so that's how much.
Fake news. The good news is he can tell the story well.
I look forward to that. So I'm going to step out of the way, but I do want to say that being able to come to my hometown to introduce this gentleman means a great deal. I've watched him in rooms with people that society has thrown away. And he has not only given them words of hope and inspiration, he's given them a practical ability to change their lives. And he has proven success metrics that are quantifiable, not just inspirational. The bottom line is, if you're in this room, you can have a heart for things, but the reality is, talk is cheap. You got to be able to perform. And I haven't seen anybody do what he does better. And so I'm honored to introduce to you Andre Norman. A little too small for me. Can't be seen on video with that thing on. Gotcha. Good afternoon. As introduced, my name is Andre Norman. And what I do for a living is called leadership development. I go around the world and I teach world leaders how to do and be better. I've worked in over 30 countries. When Honduras had the highest murder rate in the world, my phone rang. When Guatemala had murders and robberies, they were going left or right, you couldn't even go outside. My phone rang. When Liberia was post-Civil War, there were child soldiers in the street with M16s. My phone rang. When Ferguson, Missouri, Black Lives Matter erupted in the center of our country for 16 months, my phone rang. And it was my team that went to Ferguson and stopped the protest and brought healing, not just quiet. 3 years ago, there was a riot in South Carolina prisons and 7 people were dead, 30 wounded, and my phone rang. It said, Andre, there are people in here dying and we can't stop them. Will you come? I have a simple policy. If you call me, I'll show up. There was a time where I only worked with Black people because that's what I knew and was I was comfortable with. And I stayed in my comfort zone because it made sense to me. And somebody asked me to go talk to some girls. I'm like, I don't know anything about being a girl. Why would I talk to girls? I went to girls programming and I found out that 1 in 4 girls are molested before high school. That my mother had boyfriends, but none of them thought I was cute. They were scared of me. But many of these girls, their mother's boyfriends thought they were cute. And when they advanced upon them and they told mom about their boyfriend's indiscretion, mom cussed the child out and put her out of the house. So I'm trying to have a life, you're in my way. The #1 hustle or way to make money for young women and old women alike in the street is called prostitution. I used to think I had good talk game when I was in high school. I was really good with it. Then I found out post, I was refuge. I wasn't a boyfriend. What was happening at home was far worse than anything I could suggest. And that she could at least pretend that this is normal versus what her grandfather or her father or her brother was doing. I didn't understand at 14 that pursuing girls was a bad thing. I always thought it was a good thing. I couldn't imagine being in the 5th grade being harassed for sex. And every day of your life thereafter. I've never had the misfortune of being harassed for sex. It's never happened to me. I'm waiting. But it's funny, but it's not. Because I saw these young girls' brokenness, hopelessness, and despair. So now I'm working with young Black girls and young Black boys, and this is what I do. And somebody said, Andre, you're denying kids. What are you talking about? They said, there's some white kids you won't help because they're white and their parents want to pay you. I said, white kids ain't got no problems. They own everything. They run the government, they own all the businesses. This is pre-Obama. And this is just what it is. They said, no, Dre, you don't get it. So I went to an all-white street in a suburban area with the nice cars and a parking lot and a nice with the front. And I walked in, there was no metal detector. I said, this is not a school. I said, where's the metal detector? He said, what are you talking about? I said, this is a school, right? I've never been in a school without a metal detector. And they ushered me to auditorium B, and they apologized for such, because auditorium A was under construction. And auditorium B was phenomenal. And I'm standing there thinking, these little rich white kids, what problems they have? Super nice building, their own cars out front. Everything's their way. Then they walked in. Collars flipped up, Abercrombie and Fitch shirts, probably your kids. They came walking in and they sat down. I'm like, this kid's got it, man, I don't know why I'm here. And I started talking to your kids. You know something? They do drugs in the white school. And I kept talking to the kids. They drink at the white school. They have bullies at the white school. Shocking to me, they had fat kids at the white school. I grew up watching 90210 and Leave the Beaver. There was no fat kids allowed. It was just like, boom. What is this? And for some reason, all of the Leave It to Beaver shows and Partridge Family shows and Brady Bunch shows, their problems are solved at the end of a half hour. They never went into chaos like, see us next week. Mom was about to kill herself. It was always fixed. So I'm like, how y'all got problems? And I'm trying to prove my narrative because I believe that they have it great. I said, well, we don't have dads, you have dads. And that's the biggest problem in our community, they say. We don't have dads. They say, dad, the guy that sleeps upstairs. We call him the guy that sleeps upstairs. He doesn't come to any of our games, doesn't come to one event. He tolerates my mom. On occasion, his nurse or his assistant will send me something and misspell my name. He doesn't know any of my friends, anything that I like. He always has an excuse for not showing up. He was working for us. He was doing it for us. But us just wants you to be in space and to be present. So we don't have dads. We have a guy that sleeps upstairs. And when I walked out of that school, I said to myself, never again will I judge somebody based on my ignorance. And if you call me, I'll show up. That's why I visited 30 countries in the last 21 years. I visited 48 states. Too many schools, too many churches, too many synagogues, too many temples. When you call me, I show up. And I do that because as a child, I watched my mother be beaten for years. And I didn't know that your mom being beat up wasn't normal because this is the only house I've been in. I didn't get a chance to come to your house. I didn't know that this isn't how it's supposed to be. And you call it domestic violence in 2021, but there was a different name in 1975. It's called handling your household. In 1975, you had complete right to beat you. And if the police somehow did show up, they would say, Billy, keep the noise down, the neighbors. It wasn't an arrestable offense. It was your house. Men ruled the world. Finally, I get old enough to go to school. Get on the bus. I go play with the other kids, and it's phenomenal. I mean, who thought they could fit this many kids in the building and just let us run? It was like the greatest thing ever. I've been stuck in this little house forever. Now I got this massive school. Now I would just run down the halls. I would come home missing a shoe. I'm the kid came home wearing somebody else's jacket. Like, where's your shoe? I had a great day, Mom. It was a great day. You know I had a great day when I came home missing clothes. That's when you know I had a great day. And I love going to school. And then one day we're coming home on the bus, we're playing, laughing, and joking, and the bus turned the corner, and rocks came crashing through the bus window. And behind the rocks came some names. The first was Nick. Then Fairchild. Then Portsmouth. I'm 8 years old. I don't know what to do. Glass is smashing, names are screaming, and I'm falling to the floor, and I watch my cousin bleed from the face, and we both cried because we don't know what else to do. When I got home, I went to my dad, the big guy. My father's 6'6", 300 pounds, was a size 18 shoe. I said, Dad, who are these people? I never met white people before. So why are they throwing rocks at me? Nobody's ever thrown rocks at me. I said, what are these names? I've never heard these names before. What do they mean? I'm gonna let you be my dad for a minute. And your son comes home from school, bus just got stolen, kids are bleeding, turn on the news, the whole city's in uproar. Your son says to you, Dad, what does nigger mean? What are you talking about? Why are they throwing rocks at me, Dad? What are you talking about? Why are these people like this? What did I do? I'm not understanding. My father looked at me. I looked back at him, and then he walked away. And I'm standing there at 9 years old, left to process the busing crisis of Boston. And at 9 years old, I don't process stuff. Nobody wrote me and said, hey, Andre, we're gonna make the country a better place by fusing black and white kids into the same school, but you have to go through this trauma for us to get here. I never got a memo, never got a mail, never got a phone call from that day to this. And I'm not sure the schools are better. What I found out as an adult is my father grew up in a town called Petersburg, Virginia. And when he used to go to school, kids threw rocks and names at him. When we got home, it was my grandfather, his daddy said, Dad, who are these people? What's the rocks? What's the names? My father told me that's just the way it is, son. Protect your brothers and sisters and run faster. My grandfather eventually moved out their family to the north, to Boston away, and they forgot about it. It's called unresolved trauma. And he thought it would never happen. It was over until it happened to his kids. He was twice as traumatized as me, but he left me to process my pain. One day, for my mom, the beating started. One day, the beating stopped. She put my dad out. One day, the rock started. One day, the rock stopped. It just went away. And I went to school, and it was back to normal. We forgot about it. Nobody talked about it. And we moved around. I had a single mom, 6 kids living in the city. We bounced around, found a school, stick me in a school, they gave me a test. I can't read or write just like my dad. It wasn't a problem back in the 70s. There was a thing called the dummy class. They took the little kids who couldn't read and stuck them in the room and closed the door. They called the school to prison pipeline, that's what they call it now. Back then, they called it the dummy class. And I sat in there, Luckily for me, a teacher pulled me out of that class and she said, "You're not a dummy, you just learn different. I'm going to teach you your learning style." And she taught me my learning style. And lo and behold, I could read. I could run. I get to middle school. I'm around the big kids. I couldn't wait to get here, right at passes. When I got to middle school, the kids told me, "You're no good." I said, "What do you mean?" "Wrong shoes, wrong pants, wrong jacket, wrong bag. You're a free lunch kid." And they told me everything that was wrong with me. When I tried to defend it, they just told me more. And they teamed up against me. And I remember I went to homeroom and the teacher said, "Andre, you need to come get this form because you're poor, you can't afford lunch, you gotta fill this out if you want to get fed." She made me walk from the back of the class, she handed me the form and said, "Go ahead and mother sign this." And every single day I didn't come back with that form, she called my name out. "Norman, where's the form?" And finally I went to my mother, I said, "Mom, I don't want to go back to that school. The teachers are mean, the kids are mean, this place is hard." He said, "You gotta learn something, you gotta go." And I said, I need this stuff, Mom. I need Calvin Klein pants, I need a members only jacket. I gave her a list of stuff that I needed. I said, "If I'm going in, I need some stuff. I need to gear up. I just can't go in there." And she said, "I got 6 of you. I'm working 3 jobs. I can't buy that stuff. Sorry, son." I went back to school, brought the form. I went through the cafeteria and get the trays and get to the end of the line. And the lady had a big book. And she flipped through the book and my name's at N, so I'm in the middle of the book. And she gets to the middle of the book and she checked my name up. I walk on with my tray. Every day, she flipped through the book. I'm like, "Lady, I was here yesterday. We really have to do this every day?" And she said, "Doing my job." And she checked it off the day. And one day I came through the line, and the lunch mother said, "Make sheet cake." These big pans full of cake, and cut them up. I was like, "Wow, I love cake." Grab a piece of cake. I get to the end of the line, I'm like, "Yeah." She's flipping through the book. She checks me off, and she says, "That'll be a quarter for the cake." So what are you talking about? Cake costs a quarter. So I don't have a quarter. She said, "Well, put it back." Now I gotta go through the line the other way to put this piece of cake back. I hate these things. When a friend of mine came in and said, "Dre, I know exactly what you're feeling. We can go to the park and sell weed after school and make some money and get out of this gym." I said, "Sign me up." So we weren't really drug dealers. They were older kids who sold drugs. We were like little kids, so we would just run across the street, get a pack of weed for them and come back and hand it to them. And like, "Dre, go give me another bag." And I run across the street and I run back. $30 is what I would make. But it was enough to buy clean socks. It was enough to buy my first members only check. And I used to go to school, and on the way to school, we stop at the store. I don't know if you remember these days. You go in and you buy junk food, which I could never buy. I'm buying junk food now. And I used to buy the girls popcorn, and they became my friend. I'm not gonna say they were gold diggers or nothing. I'm just saying. Popcorn made a difference. I became, he's buying snacks. Now, ladies, yeah, he's the man. He's buying popcorn. Then I came to school, and I came through the line. I had my tray, and I had 3 pieces of cake. I got to the end of the line. She went to flip the book. I said, "Don't bother." I slammed the dollar on the table. There you go. I looked in her face, and for the first time I felt proud to be able to pay my way. And she couldn't look down on me no more. And I said, never again will somebody look down on me and make me feel less than. I go to 6th grade music class. Miss Ellis hands me the trumpet. She puts me in the band. Remember the day, you were all in band. We were all in band at one point in time. And she gave me a trumpet. I played the trumpet all through middle school. And the middle school came and I'm ready to go to district high school. And she says to me, you can't go to the district high school. I said, why? She says, you have a gift. What are you talking about? She said, you're a gifted trumpet player. I'm going to send you to a magnet school where you can exercise your gift. And she sent me to the magnet school. When I got there, I walked into the band room. There was a room full of nerds. I'm not going to say something like this, but it was a room full of nerds. And they looked at me, I looked at them, they said, well, can you play the thing? Play my stuff without no sheet music. I'm nice with this. I joined the band. So in the morning, I'd be in band class. In the afternoon, I hang out with my thug friends. Morning band class, I love the band class. Afternoon, my thug friends. And one day, my thug friend said, yo, what's up with that box you're carrying? Every day we see you got this box. Why are you carrying this box? I said, it's my trumpet. They said, man, that thing is so uncool. We're trying to sneak in the stores, talk to girls, get this big box, get rid of it. I said, get rid of it? This is my thing. They said, dude, trumpet or us. We can't be seen do this uncool thing. I'm 14, I'm in high school. My friends all I had. I got rid of my trumpet. Didn't want to lose my friends. I will tell you, growing up poor, growing up without a dad, growing up in the inner city, it's tough. But people have done it and made it. If you try growing up without a dream, it's impossible. There's no way it's gonna happen. But the dad gave up my trumpet, I gave up my purpose. I went on a slow descent. So I had nowhere to be, nothing to do. So I found myself in Superior Court. The judge started reading off state sentences. Said, Honor Norman, 7 to 10 years for armed robbery. 9 to 10 years armed assault with a shotgun. 9 to 10 years armed assault with a shotgun. 10 years robbery. 15 to 20 years armed carjacking. 15 to 20 years armed home invasion. 5 years for felony possession of firearms. And 18, they put me in the van, they drove me to state penitentiary, they dropped me off. When I first got there, I was scared to death. You've seen the movies. Don't drop the soap. Watch out who you're talking to. Watch out for candy bar on your bed. Y'all think that's funny until you're sitting in maximum security prison in Newman section. You look, is there candy bar on my bed? What's going on? And I'm walking into the unit, and I'm scared to death. I said to myself, I know what I'm gonna do. The first guy approaches me, I'm knocking him out. I'm gonna let them know I'm fighting for mine. And the first guy walked up on me, he's like, yo, I dropped my bag, I put my hands up. I said, yo, he said, what's up, Dre? With my boy Mel from the dummy class. He said, yo, we all here. Thaddeus is here, John's here, Bam Bam's here. It was a reunion of all my friends from the dummy class. All my friends from the principal's office. All my friends who quit band. All my friends who quit track and football. That's all it was. Anybody who ever quit on life found a way to the penitentiary. Come on, man, rock with us. We got you. And they taught me the rules of prison. Don't trust white people. Don't trust Spanish. Don't trust the guards. Don't trust black people from the other side of town. And if you're smart, you shouldn't trust us. And they said, these are the rules. This is how it works. They handed me a knife and said, let's go. And for the next 6 years, I participated in gang activity and selling drugs and everything else you can name and imagine in prison. And most people don't understand the commerce of prison contraband. So I'll do a quick breakdown of what the math is just on heroin. An average prison has 2,000 people. If you make half the people drug addicts, that's 1,000 people, which is a small number. It's usually like 80%. But for today, it'll be at 50%. A bag of heroin is $50. So if I can sell each heroin addict a bag, that's $50,000 a day, $350 a week, $1.4 million a month in heroin sales on the yard at one bag a day. And trust and believe, they're selling way more than one bag a day. Selling cocaine, selling heroin, selling weed, selling alcohol, selling gambling. There's millions of dollars being made behind those walls. And I'm in here, the gangs are not fighting for colors, they're fighting for money. And I'm in the midst of it, because I'm a soldier. Over 6 years, I fought my way to be the number 3 gang member in the state. 2.5 years in solitary, 8 cases in court, 2 new convictions, 10 years added my sentence, but I was working hard. Because I wanted to be the king of the jail. When I had the opportunity to become the king of the jail, I realized what I was becoming, the king of nowhere. I didn't want to be the king of nowhere. So I went back to my side, I said, well, what am I gonna do if I'm not gonna be the king of nowhere? First, I looked around, I said, I don't wanna be here. I wanna be free. I looked at the white guys, the black guys, the Spanish guys, guys working in church, working in the gym, guys who work in the kitchen. I looked at every group you can imagine. Everybody who got free came back. I said, free doesn't work, it's a trick. I don't want to be free because free doesn't work. I want to be successful because successful people don't come here. So I go home, go to college, and I'll be successful. I picked a school called Harvard University. So I go home, go to Harvard, be successful. So I came out my Saturday next day, I got my guys together, I said, yo, I figured it out. I'm gonna go home, I'm gonna go to Harvard, I'm gonna be successful. They gave me that same look. I said, I got it. Harvard, success, I got it. They wanted to laugh at me, but I had a habit of stabbing people, so nobody laughed. And I called my mom, she thought I was crazy. I called my dad, he thought I was crazy. I was on my own yet again. So I sat down, I re-engineered my list of going from maximum security, solitary confinement to Harvard. Then I went to the mirror, and I looked in the mirror. I said, what's inside of me that's stopping this from happening? And I started working on that list. I got my GED, taught myself the law, started going to anger management, started going to counseling, started going to college, stopped walking the track selling drugs, stopped fighting. And I spent 8 years working on me. And then November 15th, 1999, I walked out. I walked out with a purpose and a goal. That I was going to show people that people where I come from can do well, exceedingly well. First year I was out working with gang members, working with kids, and I happened to meet a gentleman named Jules Gofford from London Business School. They came to town to do something and ended up at our nonprofit, and he spent 2 days with me. He said, if this man can do this with gang members and prostitutes, what can he do with business? And he put me on a plane, they flew me to London. We came to a room like this, he said, Dre, we ain't got no script for you, because we've never done this before. That's Deutsche Bank in me. Just go do what you do. And he shoved me in a room and he closed the door. And I stood up in front of the room, and the first thing I said, listen, I've never done this before. You know what's called a corporate speech. I said, what can I do to make this the best presentation for you? And you got a room full of white guys in suits on. One guy stood up, looking like the boss. He said, listen, Andre, we appreciate you being here, but just do this. Don't talk to us in banking terms. We know more about banking than you could ever imagine. We've been doing this for hundreds of years. Tell us your story and trust that we're smart enough to draw the lines. Easy said and done. I told my story, and they drew the lines of what matched them. And they brought me back to me in the room, British Petroleum. Jonathan Bloom was the CEO. He had an epiphany. His whole world blew up. I was like, Andre, that was the greatest presentation ever. Tell me what to do with my company. I did not know this man ran a gazillion-dollar company, what it meant. He, to me, was just another guy in the room. And Abel, he's like, I got to meet with Andre. I'm sitting with Jonathan Bloom at lunch. I'm like, hey, how you doing? He's like, hey, what do we do? How do we do this? How do we take this on the world? I'm like, okay, whatever. And I walked away. Nobody had taught me relationships. Nobody had taught me how to actually leverage and help people do and be better. I just knew how to do what I do. I didn't know there was levels to it. And I just started working. And I kept working. And one day my phone rang. It was Dr. Charles Ogletree from Harvard Law School. And he said, Mr. Norman, you won a fellowship. And they gave me my email, anorman@harvard.edu. When I got it, I cried. Full-fledged. Because it said it was impossible. It said it couldn't be done. Now I'll stand here and tell you that I got it. And for the record, I do the impossible for a living. I've done it multiple times. Because I don't understand impossible. I don't know what brought you here, to this room, to this space, but it's bigger than whatever you came here for. There are things that you can actually impact. Because if I can go from the basement of a prison to the White House, if I can go from back streets like this here in this hood of Cincinnati to London Business, if I become the #1 speaker in YPO history, #1 rated speaker in YPO history, I became an EO member 3 years ago. I run prisons. The jail I used to be in called me last week and offered me a contract to come back and run their jail. It's not because they like me. They want a job done. They said, okay, he doesn't look like the solution. We're done looking for what looks like the solution. We want the solution. There are people who are dying. And before we start talking about, I need you to come to the inner city and save the black kids and save the brown kids, let's run to the border and save the Mexicans and the Haitians. No, how are your kids doing? Then you dress up, bro. Sure, you came in here on a nice boy, you're gonna go to a nice game, have a luxury box. How are your kids doing? I got a saying that I use often. I speak at YPO and corporate events. Don't jump over your own to save somebody else. Don't jump over your own kids to save somebody else's. Your kids count too. Forget about political correctness. I wish I have a son, his name is Brooks Elliott. Somebody said to me, Andre, if you put Brooks Elliott on the altar, we'll eliminate violence and famine in the world. I'm like, you better get planting some stuff. You can't have Brooks. Andre, if you put Brooks Elliott on the altar, we'll eliminate cancer. You better get some more doctors up in here. You're not getting Brooks. Andre will eliminate all police shootings in America if you just sacrifice your son. I'm like, y'all better get some more body cams or something, because you're not getting mine. Call it selfish. There's a bigger goal. Dre is a greater good. Yeah, see me in the alley. You think you're getting mine. There's no greater good bigger than my son. Number one, God gave me a gift and a responsibility, and it wasn't to sacrifice for my company or for somebody else or something else. He gave it to me to raise him so he can do good on this planet. And my son is 2 years removed from Columbia University. He speaks 4 languages. He reads and writes and writing. He had the highest math score in the country, United Kingdom, 2 years ago. And yes, his father's a gangman. Yes, his father spent 14 years in the penitentiary. Yes, his father will still not call it. I don't have my watch on, but actually for we fight. And the number one thing I run into is mom saying that he has to say out loud he had drug problem, call it something else. I literally am having somebody shit me their kid 2 weeks from now. 24-year-old, he ain't no little one. People routinely send me their kid, grab and send me my son. And I take them in. And the hardest thing to do is ask for help for your child. It's embarrassing. Somehow you failed and you ain't good enough. No, that child is his own person. And they make their own way. They're surrounded by all kinds of influences that you can't control. So don't make it about you, let's make it about them. I sat with a man who runs a tech company. And he told me all the wonderful stuff he was gonna do for the inner city. And we sat there, it's a $2 billion company. He's like telling me, oh, Greg, you're so wonderful, you're great, your story, and we're gonna team up, we're gonna do this. I said, you got kids? He said, yeah. They play sports, anything? He said, yeah. So when last time you been to one of your kids' games? Oh, I'm working. I said, don't tell me what you're gonna do for my kids if you ain't doing shit for your kids. Let's cut. He's like, I don't care how many billions of dollars you're in your company for. I know truth. If you ain't showing up for your kids, I know damn well you ain't gonna show up for my kids. Let's just call it what it is. And he sat there and we had a discussion, and I can, to his credit, he now goes to every game. He now goes to every event. The games with him. We can talk about saving the world, but it starts with jokes. Business is easy. Business is easy. I've been all over the world. Saudi Arabia, they got money that don't count. Kenya, they got money that don't count. They got houses that don't even make sense. They got weekend houses bigger than this building. Like, oh, that's just a weekend house. All right, cool. One dude had like 3 pastors, one for each wife. Like, all right, do you think? That's what I do. And I'm like, but the father said to me, when the richest guys in Saudi, that's saying something. Andre, my father taught me to work hard, take care of my family, set up for my kids, and work hard. And always give an honest answer. He says, what do I say to my kid at 20 who has everything? How do I get him to work hard? What do I say to him? So I sat down with Dad. We had a discussion on how to talk to his son. See, his bank account didn't give him articulation still on how to transfer something his son didn't understand. I was in Sweden, great friend. And I was hanging out with him. I asked Bob this early indirectly. I said, dude, he's one of the richest guys in Sweden. I said, dude, I'm a poor kid from the hood. And I've been struggling. I said, we used to play this game driving on the highway. That's my car, that's my car, that's my car, that's my car. I said, dude, what do you do after you bought everything you could possibly buy? I dreamed about buying houses and boats and planes. You've done it. His kids rode horses. He didn't buy the stable. When they rode horses, he remodeled the whole thing for like 10 million and told the kids, my kids ride whenever they want to. When they grow up, you can keep everything. 10 million was nothing to him. I said, what do you do after you buy everything you can possibly buy? What do you do next? That place is unfathomable to me. He says, Dre, I'm going to consolidate my businesses. I'm going to streamline my life. And I want to create impact. This is why do you think you're here? I want to learn from you how to create impact. He ruined my life that day. My whole goal was to be the richest guy on the planet and have one of the richest guys on the planet tell me he wanted to be me. I said, imagine if I'd have got to my destination of being the richest guy in Boston, and some of those 25-year-old kid walks up to me and says, Andre, you can buy everything that you want. Money's no issue. What do you do next? Well, I'm going to consolidate my businesses. I'm going to streamline my life. And I'm going to get back to impacting world like I used to. I stopped chasing money that day. I started chasing helping people fulfill that. I don't know what you're doing or what you want to do. If you want a real honest conversation, we can have it. We can have it. We can do measurables, we can do stats, we can do variable, whatever you want to do. You want a chapter and verse? No problem. You want a spreadsheet? No problem. I talk spreadsheet. A lot of people don't talk. I talk spreadsheet. I put it in category, rows, items, spit it out. Gotta make numbers. Gotta make sense. But I talk real. So I just want to say, I appreciate you having me. I appreciate what you're doing. I'm this one guy who started out where I started out. I went through what I went through. But if I can go from the basement of a prison, illiterate, with no guidance and support, to working for the White House and London Business School, amongst others, what can you do? What can you do? Who do you want to be a hero to? Yeah, you said was it venture capitalists, hedge fund, money people? So like, what's the biggest company you know? The guy you know owns the biggest company. Don't say his name, just say his name. How much is that company make? $100 billion market cap. And you know the guy, we'll call the guy Jeff. And you know Jeff. So imagine if you called Jeff and said, Jeff, my daughter is XYZ, can you help me? What do you think Jeff's gonna say? Get off my phone, why are you bugging me? If he's your friend, he's gonna help you. Most of you have the capacity and ability to pick up your phone and call somebody 50, 100, 200 million, $1 billion and say help. Don't suffer in silence. Don't suffer. I wish to God, when I was sitting in the penitentiary, I could have picked up the phone and called Jeff. You got to pay, right? Check this out. I got a plan. Starts with me getting the hell out of jail. Then we're going to go help some of these kids. And then we're going to do all this other stuff. 22 years I've been doing this. And now I have the ability to pick up those phones and make those phones. And I do. I pick up the phone, I make those phones. I implore you to do the same. He's inching closer. Is it time? You got to roll?
It's time.
It is officially time.
However, they don't know for what it is time.
It is time. Whatever that is, it's time. So my closing statement is I appreciate you. You're worthy. Your capacity is unlimited because we're all the same. We have unlimited capacity. Is there so my mother used to tell me, boy, if you take 10% of your energy and point to something good, you can turn the world upside down. That's why we do.
All right, get ready for this. In addition to dispensing wisdom, insights, and suggested courses of action, he also has offered to buy everybody in the room all the cocktails they would like. And we don't have to go any place. He's going to buy the cocktails for us at Ghost, what's it called? Ghost Boy, Ghost Body? Yeah, Ghost Baby.
Ghost Baby, that's it, right? Ghost Baby.
So Ghost Baby.
Ghost Baby going down, you know what I'm saying? Line up, we got some drinks. You might get it in, stop acting like you don't know.
The way that we go to Ghost Baby, which is part of the history of this building, is we go to that elevator and in groups start going down, way down underground, where beer used to be cooled 1,000 feet away, and there is a bar there called Ghost Baby. We're going right now.
Free drinks on me, that elevator.
Come join our 361 firm community of investors and thought leaders. We have a lot of events created by the community as we collaborate on investments and philanthropic interests. Join us.